The story begins in the quiet countryside of Essex during the First World War. Captain Arthur Hastings, who has been injured while serving at the front, is given a month's sick leave to recover. Unsure of where to go, he receives an invitation from an old friend, John Cavendish, to stay at his stepmother's country estate, Styles Court. Grateful for the change of scenery, Hastings accepts and soon finds himself traveling to the picturesque yet slightly old-fashioned manor that will become the setting of a dark and intricate mystery. At Styles Court, Hastings is quickly introduced to the complicated household. The matriarch is Emily Inglethorp, John's wealthy stepmother and the owner of the estate. She is a woman well into her 70s but remarkably energetic, with a strong presence that commands the household. Despite her advanced age, she has recently shocked her family by marrying a much younger man, Alfred Inglethorp. Alfred is a rather peculiar character, heavily bearded, flamboyant in dress, and noticeably sycophantic toward his wife. His presence in the house is far from universally welcomed. John Cavendish, Emily's stepson and Hastings's friend, is a barrister by profession, though not particularly ambitious. He lives at Styles with his wife, Mary Cavendish, a striking and intelligent woman who appears distant and aloof. Their marriage, Hastings notices, seems strained. Then there is Lawrence Cavendish, John's younger brother, who once studied medicine but never qualified as a doctor. Instead, he practices as a sort of amateur pharmacist and keeps mostly to himself. He is more reserved than his brother, with a dreamy, detached manner. Other residents of the house include Evelyn Howard, Miss Emily's longtime companion and factotum. She is outspoken, brisk, and fiercely loyal to Emily, though her bluntness often rubs others the wrong way. Rounding out the group is Cynthia Murdoch, a young girl Emily has taken under her wing. Cynthia works at Asti 4OY, a nearby Red Cross hospital dispensary, and spends much of her time engaged in her duties there. As Hastings settles into the household, he becomes acutely aware of the undercurrents of tension running through it. Alfred Inglethorp, with his obsequious attentions and suspiciously smooth manner, is disliked by nearly everyone. Evelyn Howard, in particular, detests him and does little to hide it. One afternoon, she even bursts out angrily at Hastings, declaring that Alfred is a wicked man and that Emily is being made a fool of by him. Hastings is startled by her vehemence, but it only deepens his impression that all is not well at Styles Court. Days pass with a curious blend of quiet domesticity and simmering discord. Hastings spends his time conversing with Mary Cavendish, whose keen intelligence and subtle melancholy draw his attention. He senses she feels trapped in her marriage, though she speaks of it only in hints. The strained atmosphere between her and John becomes more apparent the longer Hastings observes. Then, one afternoon, Hastings is walking in the village when he encounters an old acquaintance, Hercule Poirot, the eccentric Belgian detective he had once met years before. Poirot, now a refugee from war-torn Belgium, is living in a nearby village with the support of Emily Inglethorp, who has generously provided lodgings for several displaced Belgians. Delighted by the chance meeting, Hastings renews the friendship. Poirot, with his egg-shaped head, sharp eyes, and meticulous habits, is just as distinctive as Hastings remembers. Though retired from active sleuthing, Poirot still radiates a sense of alert intelligence that seems always attuned to the smallest details. Back at Styles, the household tensions come to a head one evening. Hastings overhears fragments of a violent quarrel between Emily and Alfred. Later, Evelyn Howard storms out of the house after an argument with Emily, vowing never to return. The atmosphere grows increasingly strained, with whispered conversations, sudden silences, and uneasy glances exchanged across the dinner table. Hastings feels the weight of some looming crisis, but cannot yet grasp its nature. One hot July night, the crisis arrives. The household is abruptly woken in the early hours by violent noises. Emily Inglethorp has been stricken in her bedroom, writhing in agony and gasping for breath. The family rushes to her side, but the door is locked. By the time they manage to force it open, she is in the throes of a terrible convulsion. Her face is contorted, her limbs jerking uncontrollably. She gasps out a few strangled words, then collapses. Despite Lawrence's efforts, it is clear she is dying. Moments later, she is gone. The sudden death throws the household into chaos. Lawrence pronounces it a likely heart attack, but others are less convinced. Emily's body shows signs of poisoning, her distorted features, her struggles to breathe, the spasms that racked her. The possibility of foul play looms large. Alfred Inglethorp, curiously, is absent during the crucial moments of her final illness, having been seen walking in the garden. His absence is suspicious, but so too are the varied reactions of the family members. No one seems free of tension or secrecy. It is then that Hastings recalls his friend Poirot, the detective who once solved mysteries with uncanny brilliance. He immediately suggests summoning him. John Cavendish, hesitant but desperate for answers, agrees. Hastings hurries to fetch Poirot, who arrives with his customary precision and seriousness, examining the scene with piercing attention. He studies the bedroom, the overturned table, the shattered cup on the floor, the fireplace where fragments of a burned document lie amid the ashes. He notices Emily's nightstand, with a small, green-topped bottle of bromide and a straggling trail of spilled powder. Poirot asks questions quietly, but his sharp gaze misses nothing. From the outset, Poirot suspects poison. The violent symptoms point towards strychnine, a deadly alkaloid known for its cruel effects on the body, yet the means of administering it are not clear. Lawrence insists there was nothing unusual in the cocoa Emily drank before bed, and Cynthia, who dispenses medicine at the hospital, swears she never handled anything that could explain the death. Poirot carefully gathers evidence: the remains of Emily's coffee cup, the pieces of the burned letter, the positions of the objects in the room. He notes especially that Emily's door had been bolted from the inside, suggesting no intruder could have entered. Suspicion falls heavily on Alfred. His marriage to Emily had long been resented, and now, with her death, he stands to gain financially. Yet others, too, might have motives. John and Lawrence, as stepsons, may inherit the estate. Mary's unhappiness with her husband could conceal secrets of her own. Cynthia's position in the dispensary grants her access to poisons. Evelyn Howard, though seemingly loyal to Emily, had quarreled bitterly with her just before the tragedy. Everyone, it seems, is caught in a web of suspicion. The coroner's inquest confirms Poirot's suspicions. Emily Inglethorp died from strychnine poisoning. But the mystery deepens, for strychnine is usually prescribed in medicinal doses, and it appears she had been taking it under her doctor's orders. Could her death have been a tragic accident of improper dosage? Or was it a deliberate act of murder, with the strychnine somehow concentrated and administered secretly? The uncertainty keeps the case alive, and Poirot's keen interest only grows. Meanwhile, Hastings becomes increasingly entangled in the household dramas. He finds himself sympathetic toward Mary, sensing her loneliness, though he cannot entirely read her guarded emotions. He notes with alarm how John appears more anxious and withdrawn, while Lawrence drifts in nervous silence. Tensions rise further when Wantermaken dies. Alfred abruptly vanishes, leaving behind a hastily scribbled note. His disappearance fuels rumors that he is the guilty party, though Poirot refuses to leap to conclusions. As the investigation proceeds, Poirot's methodical approach stands in contrast to Hastings's impulsive theorizing. Hastings is quick to suspect one person after another: John, Mary, Cynthia, even Lawrence, based on scraps of behavior or overheard words. Poirot, by contrast, insists on the importance of small, seemingly trivial details: the arrangement of a table, the state of a key, the precise timing of events. He repeatedly warns Hastings that assumptions can be misleading. Poirot uncovers curious threads of evidence. He notes that Emily had written a will, but its exact provisions are uncertain, and the burned fragments suggest she may have been revising it. He learns of quarrels, overheard words, and secret rendezvous. A strange incident at the dispensary catches his attention. A bottle of strychnine had recently gone missing, though no one admits to knowledge of it. Cynthia's role, though seemingly innocent, becomes shadowed by this unexplained detail. The mystery thickens with each passing day. Poirot begins to conduct subtle experiments, moving objects, observing reactions, testing hypotheses in silence. He asks Hastings to watch carefully for slips of the tongue or sudden changes of manner. More than once, Hastings sees him studying people with an intensity that suggests he is close to the truth. yet the case remains unsolved. Who poisoned Emily Inglethorp, and how was it done in a house full of people, each with secrets of their own? As suspicion continues to swirl, and the shadow of murder looms over Styles' court, Hastings realizes that only Poirot, with his extraordinary mind, can unravel the tangled skein of lies, motives, and hidden passions. And so, the investigation deepens, with every clue raising new questions and every answer leading to another door yet unopened. Poirot begins his inquiries in earnest, moving through Styles' court with quiet precision. He examines the bedroom once more, lingering over the little details everyone else has overlooked. The broken cup near the bed, the scattered fragments of a burned document in the fireplace, and the peculiar condition of Emily's writing table. He asks to see her medicines, and Lawrence produces several bottles. Among them is strychnine, prescribed in harmless doses. But Poirot frowns at the inconsistency. Strychnine does not cause death unless it is given in concentrated form, and the normal tablets could never have produced such violent results unless someone manipulated the dosage. The police, meanwhile, arrive to carry out their own investigation. Inspector Japp of Scotland Yard, an old acquaintance of Poirot, takes charge. Japp is genial, blunt, and practical, a man who prefers direct facts to fine theories. He greets Poirot warmly, for he knows of the detective's brilliance, and though he sometimes scoffs at Poirot's obsession with trifles, he respects his instincts. Hastings watches as the two men exchange views, Japp pressing on with his straightforward police work, Poirot probing the subtleties with his famous little gray cells. Suspicion quickly tightens around Alfred Inglethorp. He was absent at the critical hour, his marriage was unpopular, and Emily had been overheard quarreling with him on the day of her death. The discovery that he had recently tried to purchase poison at a local chemist only strengthens the case against him. John Cavendish, anxious to protect the family name, insists that no scandal must attach to Styles, but the evidence seems damning. Yet Poirot is not satisfied. He reminds Hastings that suspicion is not proof. He questions the logic of Alfred's actions. Why would a man so obviously under scrutiny act in such a blatant manner? Poirot urges patience, for he senses the true solution lies hidden beneath appearances. As days pass, Poirot notices a series of peculiar incidents. One morning, he asks Hastings to accompany him into the village, where he inquires discreetly at the chemist's. It is true that Alfred Inglethorp purchased strychnine, but the quantity and manner of purchase are too obvious, too clumsy. Poirot muses that such actions may be designed to throw suspicion in a particular direction. Back at Styles, Hastings becomes more entangled in the personal dramas of the household. Mary Cavendish, in particular, draws his attention. One afternoon, they walk together in the garden, and she speaks with quiet bitterness of her unhappiness. She feels imprisoned in her life with John, longing for freedom, for something beyond the polite suffocation of Styles. Hastings is struck by her intelligence and dignity, but also by the shadow of secrecy in her eyes. When she breaks off suddenly and changes the subject, Hastings wonders what truth she hides. Cynthia Murdoch, too, falls under scrutiny. She is cheerful, charming, and outwardly innocent, but Poirot questions her closely about her work in the dispensary. Could she have had access to strychnine? Cynthia admits she handles many dangerous substances in her daily work, but insists she never took anything from the hospital. Poirot merely nods, filing the detail away. Then comes another revelation, the question of Emily's will. It emerges that she had made a will years before, leaving the estate to her husband Alfred. But a new draft was rumored to exist, one that might have altered the distribution. The burned fragments in her fireplace seemed to suggest she was revising her will shortly before her death. Who, then, would benefit if she died before completing it? Poirot's eyes gleam with interest, but he shares little of his conclusions. Alfred's behavior grows increasingly suspicious. He writes a letter, apparently to a Mrs. Rikes, a woman in the village with whom he seems to have some clandestine understanding. Hastings, John, and Mary all become aware of Alfred's furtive activities, and gossip begins to spread. Alfred insists the relationship is innocent, but his words are slippery and unconvincing. When Evelyn Howard reappears unexpectedly after her quarrel with Emily, she adds fuel to the fire, declaring that Alfred has long been infatuated with Mrs. Reichs. Evelyn's return complicates matters further. She is brusque, practical, and unafraid to speak her mind. She confides to Hastings that she warned Emily repeatedly against Alfred, to no avail. Though Evelyn herself has little to gain from Emily's death, her outspoken hostility toward Alfred gives her testimony weight. Poirot listens politely, but once again he cautions against assuming too quickly. Then, a strange incident occurs. Poirot stages a small experiment in Cynthia's room, rearranging objects in seemingly trivial ways. Hastings is baffled, but Poirot insists it is necessary to confirm a suspicion. Later, Poirot gathers the household together in a tense confrontation. He produces a letter, allegedly written by Alfred to Mrs. Reichs, which appears to implicate him further. Yet, astonishingly, Poirot reveals that the handwriting does not match Alfred's at all. It has been carefully forged. Someone, it seems, is deliberately trying to cast suspicion upon Alfred. This revelation shakes the household. If Alfred is not the guilty man, then who is orchestrating the plot against him? Poirot begins to focus more intently on the smaller details. The peculiar timing of Emily's attack, the position of the door bolt, the presence of certain medicine bottles in Lawrence's possession. He points out that Emily's death occurred hours after she took her cocoa, which is unusual for strychnine poisoning, since the drug usually acts within a much shorter time. The delay suggests a clever manipulation, some subtle trick designed to confuse medical expectations. Hastings, meanwhile, continues to speculate wildly, entertaining one theory after another. At one moment, he suspects Lawrence with his medical knowledge and proximity to the poisons. At another, he imagines Mary might be hiding an illicit affair and desperate to free herself. Poirot listens with amusement, occasionally chiding Hastings for his imagination. "You look only at the big gestures, mon ami," Poirot says. "But the truth it hides in the little things. The inquest and subsequent legal proceedings bring matters to a head." Alfred is arrested on suspicion of murder, largely due to the forged letter and his dubious reputation. Yet Poirot remains unconvinced. He begins working feverishly behind the scenes, piecing together small fragments into a larger pattern. He requests permission to examine Emily's papers, to analyze the chemical residues in her coffee cup, and to trace the movements of each household member on the night of her death. One evening, Poirot takes Hastings aside and confides in cryptic terms that the case is nearing its climax. He hints that the murderer is not the person everyone suspects, but someone far closer, someone shielded by clever deception. Hastings, astonished, presses for more, but Poirot only smiles and insists that patience will reveal all. Just when it seems Alfred will be condemned by the weight of suspicion, Poirot makes a dramatic announcement. He is ready to expose the truth. He summons the household to the drawing room, declaring that the mystery of Emily Inglethorp's death can at last be explained. The family gathers in nervous anticipation, each person tense and wary. Hastings's heart races, certain that the great detective is about to unmask the criminal. But Poirot, with maddening restraint, says only that the time is not yet right. He must confirm one final detail, one last piece of evidence. Until then, the solution must remain hidden. He assures them, however, that justice will be done, and that the guilty cannot escape forever. The suspense deepens, and Hastings feels the strain of waiting. Poirot's certainty that the truth is close only heightens the tension. Somewhere in the house, behind the masks of civility and grief, a murderer walks free, watching and waiting as the net closes in. And with each passing hour, the sense of danger grows more acute, as though the very walls of Styles Court hold their breath in anticipation of the revelation to come. The days that follow are tense and heavy with unease. Alfred Inglethorp, though officially charged, insists on his innocence, and even Japp begins to admit the case is not quite as airtight as it first appeared. Poirot, meanwhile, goes about in his quiet, meticulous way, arranging papers, making notes, and questioning servants and villagers with his characteristic politeness. Hastings grows restless, frustrated that Poirot seems to spend more time fussing over trifles than directly confronting the matter of the murder. Then, One morning, Poirot announces he has all he needs. He requests that everyone assemble in the drawing room at Styles Court that evening. The family obeys, though with reluctance. John looks pale and weary, Mary tense but composed, Lawrence nervous and fidgeting, Cynthia confused, Evelyn watchful, and Alfred, now released on bail, swaggering with a mixture of defiance and anxiety. Poirot stands before them, his egg-shaped head gleaming in the lamplight, his mustaches stiff with importance. Hastings waits breathlessly as the detective begins his famous reconstruction. Poirot starts by addressing the apparent cause of Emily Inglethorp's death, strychnine poisoning. He explains the difficulty. The symptoms were unmistakable, yet the timing was all wrong. Normally, strychnine acts within minutes of ingestion, yet Emily's seizure occurred hours after she took her cocoa. Why? This puzzle, Poirot declares, is the key to the entire case. He reveals that Emily's strychnine tablets were not in their original form. Someone had tampered with them, substituting the harmless coating with bromide powder so that the strychnine remained unabsorbed until it combined with another substance later in the evening. That other substance, Poirot explains, was the tonic Emily regularly took, which contained potassium bromide. The combination released the poison suddenly, hours after ingestion, producing the violent death at an unexpected time. It was a clever trick designed to confuse doctors and investigators alike. Gasps ripple through the room as the family listens. Poirot continues calmly, step by step, piecing together the evidence. The forged letter, he says, was a deliberate plant to throw suspicion onto Alfred. The quarrel Emily had with Evelyn Howard was genuine, but her anger was more directed at suspicions of Alfred's loyalty than at anything else. Yet the true culprit, Poirot insists, is not Alfred at all. Poirot pauses dramatically. Mesdames et messieurs, the murderer is one who had both the knowledge and the opportunity. One who was close enough to Emily to alter her medicines without arousing suspicion. One who stood to gain much from her death. All eyes dart around the room. Lawrence trembles, John clenches his fists, Mary's face is pale. Alfred, visibly relieved, allows himself a triumphant smirk. Poirot fixes his gaze and speaks the name, Alfred Inglethorp. For a moment, the room erupts with confusion. Alfred shouts in protest, insisting Poirot is mistaken, while the others stare in disbelief, but Poirot raises a hand for silence. He explains in patient detail how Alfred engineered the substitution of the strychnine tablets, using his position as Emily's husband to tamper with her medicine. He anticipated that suspicion would naturally fall upon him, so he took pains to arrange false clues, the forged letter, the purchase of poison, his conspicuous quarrels, hoping that the weight of evidence would seem too obvious and lead others to conclude he was being framed. It was, Poirot explains, a double bluff. Alfred relied on the assumption that investigators would dismiss the straightforward solution as too simple. But Poirot, remembering his own dictum that truth is often hidden in the smallest details, saw through the deception. The delay in the poison's action, the tampered tablets, the bromide substitution, these details could not be ignored. Evelyn Howard suddenly cries out, realizing that all her suspicions were right after all. John and Lawrence sit stunned, while Mary, quiet and pale, whispers a prayer of thanks. Cynthia bursts into tears, overwhelmed by the revelation. Alfred, cornered and raging, makes a last desperate protest, but Japp steps forward with grim satisfaction. The evidence, combined with Poirot's meticulous reconstruction, is undeniable. Poirot, however, is not yet finished. He turns to John Cavendish and Mary. He explains gently that during the investigation he discovered their marriage troubles and that each had been tempted to shield the other at different moments. Yet neither had anything to do with Emily's death. Their misunderstandings, Poirot says, nearly tore them apart, but now the truth can set them free. Hastings watches as John and Mary exchange a look of sudden clarity, a quiet reconciliation forming between them. As the family absorbs the enormity of the revelation, Poirot concludes his narrative. He explains that Emily's fortune will now pass according to her will, with Alfred excluded by law due to his crime. The household, though shaken, is at last free of suspicion and fear. When the others disperse, Hastings lingers with Poirot. He is awestruck by the detective's brilliance, yet also slightly exasperated at how long Poirot kept his secrets. Poirot only smiles, twirling his mustaches. Patience, mon ami. To rush is to risk error. One must permit the little gray cells to do their work. Outside, the night at Styles Court is quiet once more. The tragedy that darkened its halls has been laid bare, the guilty unmasked, and justice set in motion. Yet for Hastings, the memory of that summer will linger forever. The strange days of tension and suspicion, the sudden violent death, and the triumph of Hercule Poirot, who had once again shown that no mystery, however tangled, can withstand the patient brilliance of his mind. And so ends the affair at Styles, the first of many cases in which Poirot's genius would shine, but never forgotten by those who lived through its shadow.